Yeah, do you remember this? This was a trend for a little bit of like, we're going to be PUBG, but 500 players. And ends up, it's not a good idea for a whole bunch of reasons. And then people started backing off of it. At first, I always joked as PUBG with 0 players because the amount of players in the match isn't what makes the game good, right? And so it wasn't a real differentiator. But think about what we see today, right now, with numbers when we say dead game. What we're talking about there is concurrent players because you're caring about the number of players that you can match into, right? So if you're playing, I don't know, something by, like Marvel Rivals, there's 227,000 people playing it right now. So you can find games. But now think about if those games had to be lumped into, like Improbable is trying to do 10,000 people at a time. You're going to have a limited number of 10,000 people games, right? And so you're going to have a limited number of choices those games can be about. You're going to have a limited number of just waiting we're looking at Marvel Rivals, the number one, but let's look down at the finals, which is the example I kind of use as the biggest, smallest venture-backed game, Nexon backed. And there are 12,000 concurrent players. So if you had 10,000 people in your game, that means everyone's just 2,000 people are waiting for the next game, I guess, to start, right? And so it's not solving that problem. And so I'm friends with the people who started Improbable, Herman. There's gone up from the crypto, and Herman, you're getting weird there on that stuff, dude. But I always kept arguing with them, as Improbable is not solving a problem anybody cared about. And if you remember, they took the game Scavengers by Midwinter and made a version of it that had 10,000 people in it. I was part of the beta. I ran around in it, and I couldn't tell any of them were real or a bot. It doesn't make a difference. It's not who I'm interacting with. It's not who I'm having a relationship with. It's not who I'm playing with. It's just noise in the background, and those could be bots or real people. But now, the trend started because they looked at PUBG and goes, oh my God, you solved the server problem. The server problem was when you have 20 servers or 5 servers of 20 people on it, those are more expensive. When you just have one server with no AI on it, it's cheap. Now, of course, they've added AI and they've added all this complexity and everyone's filled it with bots. That's made it more expensive, but that's still a problem, right? There's that game mode that I really, really liked in Call of Duty that I can never remember the name of. That was their first extraction game mode. And I played single player and I've had a really fun time playing it. But then they turned it into the zombie mode because it was so expensive on the way it was before. And they kind of killed the mode because it was just too expensive to run. You didn't have enough human players in it for the number of servers that you had to stand up. And so, yeah, these went away because you don't have a endless number of people to match into. So you actually want to have smaller numbers. Now, I don't know how many times someone asked me to play some one-on-one game with them. I don't like those games. Because to me, that's not fun. Because that's like one skill that you have in that game is going to be what the whole game's about. Where I can play something like, I was playing Battlefield 5 the other day, and our team won. And if you asked anybody on our team, on our squad, because we were talking to each other, just talking to strangers, it's fun sometimes, why we won, they would say me, because I ran that team. I ran where we were attacking, what we were doing. And because there's a couple maps that I know there's strategies that you can win, even if the rest of this team is bad. If you have one good squad, you can win. And it's fun. And I'm all talking to them. I don't care if they're shooting other humans or bots or, I guess kind of. But right, but I don't have an understanding of that. And so when you have these 10,000 players, who cares? Right? Just who cares? And then I remember Scavengers had this problem of, I think you were supposed to be 120 players in it because they were trying to the start of that, right? That was a while ago. And they would get nicked because they had 60 to 80 people in the games. Now, 60 to 80 people is enough to have a fun game in Scavengers. But people thought, this is a dead game because it doesn't have 120. It's not full. And they took not being full as being failure. And that was at the start of the dead games. God knows we say everything's a dead game now. So it's even worse now. And people want to shy away from that. Right? But the big thing is even if you have a healthy community, if you have them all in one game, that just is hard to match into. Now, there's MMO-ish stuff, and who cares about, whatever. Big world stuff, that's different. But if you're trying to do something competitive like a PUBG or something like a Battlefield, there's a limit to the number of people that you care about. And it's your squad, and it's the people you're going to interact with or people you're going to shoot. It doesn't need to be an endless number. Honestly, when people are talking about the 10,000 player PUBG kind of games, I'm like, that's just going to take forever for people to die. I'm going to go hide in a corner for a while and just stay alive. So yeah, it just wasn't an interesting thing, and it wasn't a differentiator. The number of players, and I still people see talking about that, and I get why, because it's an interesting idea that's solvable, I guess. But like again, you're not solving a problem anybody cares about, and instead we're trying to solve this problem of how do you launch without being a big AAA company that can just either have the IP or just have all the follow-on content that you need these days to do a big multiplayer game. I mean, right now, Nexon, which has gotten hundreds of millions, tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of investment from Nexon, the finals, excuse me, from Nexon, they got the investment. A Lethal Company made by one person has more players in it. Now, you can't just say, oh, let's all make a single player or solo dev Lethal Company. We'll all just make Lethal Companies. We've seen a bunch of Lethal Company ripoffs, right? It doesn't work. You get lucky, right? And so the indie games will occasionally still get a lucky one up in there. I mean, let's talk about Rust, right? Rust is the monster. Yeah, Gary is knocking it out of the park with that one. But like, that's the oddity, right? I mean, you have like Hell Let Loose, and go look up here. Oh, look, there's Left 4 Dead 2 still hanging on. Farming Simulator 25 is doing well, right? But you have some, but it's really hard to do a multiplayer game, and it's way better to have a multiplayer game with a community that's playing it. It's way better to spend what's going to differentiate your game not on the number of people who can play the game, but the experience they have inside of those numbers, and then having that fidelity of that experience be higher. And so smartly, the industry's moved to there, and where 30 is a way more interesting number, or even, I mean, I think finals is 16 players, or it's 3 teams of 15, right? 5 teams of 3, I think. I don't really play it. But you know what I'm saying? Like they're breaking it up that way, and even they're making it smaller teams with like 3s instead of 4s, just because it's easier for people to match into. Which is always a thing of like, if every game's 4, you should do 4. But yeah, I think we've moved past that. Yeah. 10,000 player thing was just such a weird.